You're listening to Brainwork Framework, a business and marketing podcast, brought to you by focus-biz.com.
Welcome, everyone, and thanks for tuning into this episode. With us today is a guest who helps teams develop leaders and build elite culture. He's a leadership consultant, a keynote speaker, a performance coach, and an author. And today we're going to be diving deep into all the things that make team building and great leaders, like leadership, culture, implementing systems and processes of high performance, and your mindset. David Kitchen, thanks so much for joining me. How are you?
Oh, dude, I'm great, man. Thanks for having me. I'm excited to do this. We'll have a great conversation here today.
Absolutely. Looking forward to it. So, David, tell me more about your journey through entrepreneurship. What were you doing before that kind of built into what you're doing today?
Yeah, so I spent the first 10 years of my career as a college strength and conditioning coach. So out of college, I had a business degree, actually. So I graduated with a degree in global management, and I got out and I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I'd been a football player the majority of my life. I tried IT sales. So I got into tech sales to start, which, made sense at the time. I was like, this is a great way to make money. It'll be a great situation. And within 6 months, I was looking around at our Christmas party, and everybody was enjoying it, having drinks, had their nice watches on, drove their nice cars. And I was just kind of like, this isn't the future that I want. Like, this isn't for me. And so I walked away from that. I wrote letters to every Division I school on the East Coast. And I said, I'll come work for you for free if you give me an opportunity to come coach. And so I did. So I quit my job and I moved to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, which was about 5 hours from where I lived at the time. And from there, I had a 10-year career in college strength and conditioning. It included, I was fortunate enough to be the youngest head strength coach at 24 years old. I was the youngest in the country at the time. Then got my opportunity at big time football in Division I. I was 26 years old, so I was the youngest at that level as well. That snowballed into this beautiful and awesome career, shaping cultures and building leaders at the highest level of sport. And what I didn't realize at the time was that it was setting me up for act 2 of my career. What I didn't realize was all those experiences I was getting around building leaders, building team culture, seeing adversity, seeing systems and processes being put in place. It was setting me up to be an entrepreneur. So in year 10, the pandemic hit and I was looking and doing what pretty much everybody else in the country and the world was doing, a lot of soul searching. And the opportunity came up to re-sign my contract and to stay for another season. And it just didn't sit. And I had heard people saying throughout my entire career, we need more leaders. I heard it from administrators, coaches, etc. And I had a player come in my office who was the best leader that I had ever coached and a phenomenal basketball player at that. And he came in and he said, Coach, I've been the best player on every team I've ever been on. Everybody's always telling me to lead, but nobody ever taught me how. That was like the light bulb moment. Like every entrepreneur kind of has that moment that's like, oh, there's my business. So for me, I was like, oh, there's my business. Like I had built leadership councils. I had this curriculum. I had built culture. I'd done all these things. So I'm like, okay, I can take this and turn it into some sort of service. Wasn't sure what that would look like. So I Googled, how do you start an LLC? Like most entrepreneurs start. Went back to school and started working on my PhD because I knew I had the experience, but I didn't have the psychology behind it. I had a master's in sports psych, but it just didn't cover enough. So I went back to school, started my PhD, and just started putting out free content. I wasn't sure if it was going to work. My family thought I was crazy. Everybody thought I was crazy because I walked away from a Division I job and stepped out into the unknown in the height of the pandemic, starting a business that was highly predicated on people. A lot of people looked at me and were like, you're out of your mind, but it worked really well. So I put out free content and had the opportunity. People started getting into my messages and I was able to go and speak to teams. And some of them were virtual. Some of them were in person. Lucky for us from a business standpoint, we were in the pandemic. A lot of it was virtual. So it kept our overhead super low. So I had little to no startup costs. And fortunately, again, using my background and my connections, I didn't have any marketing costs because I had already built a brand within coaching. My target audience and my target client was my network. So it just worked out well to get us started. So that built the foundation for who we are today. That lasted about a year where we were doing athletics only. It was like 99% athletics, 1% business. And then from there, I had dinner with a friend of mine who was a really good friend in high school. We grew up together. We kind of went our separate ways. He built a really great career, really impressive career in sales and being a sales director and sales manager. At the time, he was the North American sales manager for the second largest telecom company in the world. So he had really built this illustrious career in sales. And we had dinner together. We're talking and he's asking about what I'm doing and what the company does. And he's like, dude, you would kill it in the corporate world. And I'm like, really? Like, I don't know, man. I mean, I think, I'm a coach. Like, I don't really know much about the suit and tie world. And he's like, no, man, you would kill it. And I was like, okay. And he's like, I'm actually looking to start a business of my own, sales training. And I was like, oh, okay, that's pretty cool. And he's like, what if we teamed up and we did this together? So he bought in. He's a business owner now. We launched our corporate sales division. We then started doing corporate training. And flash forward a couple of years, here we are, man. We have 100 plus clients, and we're about 80% corporate, 20% athletics, and we're thriving, man. And we're enjoying every step of the road, But the first year and a half of it was definitely building the plane and flying it at the same time.
That is absolutely incredible. Wow. Isn't it crazy to see how our past experiences kind of shape us into the entrepreneurs we are today? And we have to be a little bit crazy to want to go into entrepreneurship, to be a business owner. There's a lot of legwork in the beginning. We don't know what we're doing. And like you said, hey, I'm going to Google search how to start an LLC. Where do I go from here? We just kind of figure things out along the way. But it's that drive and that ambition to see that end goal. You're like, this is either going to be really worth it, or we're going to skip it and pivot to something else. And it seems like even your business has transformed over the years as well.
Oh, yeah, it's grown tremendously. If you would have told me when I first started this that this is what it would look like, that I would have a team and that we would be doing the things we're doing, I'd be flying around the country, and more importantly, that I'd be in boardrooms instead of locker rooms, I would have laughed in your face. I'd have been like, no way. We might hit it big in the athletic space. That's probably what I would have said. And at one point, we even started to sell merch. So we started to sell like t-shirts and stuff because I was just trying to keep the lights on. Like, it was early days, and they're like, I got to find different streams of income here. We were in between speaking gigs. And so it's like, we didn't have any recurring revenue streams. So you start to get creative, like you said, and pivot a little bit. And I realized very quickly, like, I called the guy that was working with me part-time at the time. And I said, dude, I do not want to be in the inventory management business. I do not want to be in the merchandise business. I do not want to be in the apparel business. So shut it off now. So to this day, you can't see it here, but there's a closet to the left of me that is filled with boxes of the original merch that we made. It's still there. We give it out as freebies now because
Yeah.
I was like, I'm done. Like, after a couple weeks of running to the post office and mailing stuff out, and we didn't have a fulfillment center. Nothing was drop shipped. It was printed, shipped to us. We had to take the orders and track them manually. Like, we just had no infrastructure to do something like that. But that's the beauty of entrepreneurship. Like, you figure it out as you go. And we all have these things that we look back on and we're like, what was I thinking? That was a really bad move by me. But they all set up experiences for you to do something else down the line. Where I'm at now is a combination of the experiences I had as a coach, the experiences I had growing up, and the coaches that poured into me and the people that poured into me, being from a single parent household. Like, all those things built and compounded over time and shaped the business that I now run. So it's a really cool thing when you look back, and I talk about it a lot like a hallway. Everybody's life behind them is like a hallway, and there's doors on both sides of the hallway. And if you open each door and look in, there's a lesson, there's a story, and there's a lesson. And the people that are successful in life are the ones that are able to take those lessons with them to the next door.
Absolutely. And I'm sure that affects someone's ability to lead using their past experience to help shape the team and what they're doing. Leadership is obviously incredibly important when you're trying to motivate a team and keep them on track to reach the end goal. When it comes to like developing the leadership traits, I see that there's the 5 C's of successful leaders. Do you mind taking me through what those are?
Yeah, where the 5 C's came from was the backbone of our curriculum. It's the backbone of what we teach. And I knew what good leadership looked like because I had been around it so often, but I didn't have names for it. I didn't have specific things. I was like, I know what this is. You know it when you see it, but how do we teach it? So what I did is, like I said, I was working on my PhD, and I went back and I said, okay, what are the 5 most common traits of successful leadership? And again, sometimes the entrepreneurial universe lines up for you. And the research happened to reveal that all of them started with C. And so the marketing and the business brain was like, this is great. We have the 5 C's. Here they are. It just worked out that way. So I always preface it by saying I did not come up with these. These are research backed, and it was just the best business coincidence of all time because they now form the backbone of our curriculum. But those 5 C's are the traits and the characteristics that if somebody is above proficient in all of these things, 9 times out of 10, they will be a successful leader. That being said, it does not mean that everybody starts in the same place, right? So there may be certain things that you're good at, but if you really dive into them, you can learn that they all lend each other to the process, right? They kind of build upon each other. So starting in the middle, say the middle, because I picture it like 4 quadrants and then one in the middle that overlaps into all of them, right? So the one in the middle that overlaps into everything is character. And when I say character, people often think it's your reputation or it's this or it's a lot of things. But what it really is a combination of your experiences, who you want to be, your vision, your mission, and your values. And great leaders know who they are and they know who they're not. And they're very clear about what they're trying to achieve. So they understand their vision. They also understand what it takes on a daily basis to achieve that vision. It may not look the same every day, but the mission is the same. It's moved towards that vision. And then every great leader has a set of values. Well, the way I say it is they protect them in the storm. So a lot of people say, especially in HR, and kind of going to take a little stab at corporate America here, but they say, what do you stand for? That's what everyone says. What are your core values? What do you stand for? I think that's nonsense because great leaders don't stand for anything. They fight for things. So standing is a very passive activity. It implies that you're just standing. So I think about it this way. You could be on the track. If you're just standing there, you're still going to get run over when the train comes. And anyone that's in any types of leadership knows it's messy. The train is coming. And so we have to fight for things in our life. So great leaders have this set of values that they fight for. And those things show up in their businesses, they show up in their relationships, they show up in their interactions, they show up in their daily habits. So that forms the core of your ability to have these other C's. So once you have that character in place, and the cool thing is that even though the character, you could say, oh, I have it in place, it's a never ending thing. You're always working on it, you're always refining it, it's always getting better. Once you have that character there, now you're somebody worth following. Like now you're somebody, and that's the first step of being a leader is lead yourself first. Be somebody worth following that's going somewhere worth going. So you have your character. From there, you are able to start being consistent in what you do. You're able to be consistent in the way that you deploy your resources, be consistent in the way you deploy your energy. You're able to be consistent in your interactions, in the way that you react or respond to stress, success, adversity, all the things that are going to be coming. For your followers, the people that are trying to follow you, people operate off of pattern recognition. We operate off of our ability to some degree predict the behavior of others. And so if you're not consistent, there's no chance that people will want to follow you. There's nothing worse than an inconsistent person. The example that I always give is if you go on a date with somebody on their first date, they're very nice to you. That's great. Then you go on the second date and they throw a plate at you. Are you going to go on a third date? Probably not. More importantly, are you going to ask that person to marry you? Probably not. That's why a lot of relationships end after the first big fight because you see how somebody deals with adversity. The majority of divorces come after some sort of major financial setback or major life event. Why? Because you find out how the other person deals with adversity. Now, on the flip side, a lot of relationships end after one of the two is successful. And when I say relationship, I don't just mean romantic. It could be a friendship. Somebody gets some sort of success and all of a sudden they're a different person. That consistency piece is so important for, again, building that foundation. If you picture it and you're moving up the ladder, you have your character, you have your consistency, you're able to actually commit to things. Because once you're consistent, you're able to start making strides towards something. Now you have to decide, what am I going to commit to that I'm going to make these strides towards? And for great leaders, it's the people, it's the vision, and that they're a part of. That organization may be your community, it may be your family, it may be your business, it may be your athletic team, whatever. They are committed to the people, the vision, and the organization. They understand if they're committed to those three things, the results will follow. It's not about committing to the result. It's about committing to the people and the vision and the organization. Those are the things that make up all the systems and the processes that lead to the results. You have your commitment. You have to display that on a daily basis by doing more than what's asked of you, showing up and looking for new ways to innovate. Like nothing says I'm committed to getting here faster than looking at someone and saying, hey, that's a great idea. Let's implement it. Because now you're taking the ego out and you're saying, no, we're all committed to this. I'm committed to the vision. I'm displaying that by allowing you to bring feedback to the table, innovate on what we're doing, and implement it into our SOPs or our standard operating procedures. So that's your commitment piece. Once you have all those things together, you know who you are, you know how you're going to get there, you know where you're going. Now you can start to communicate that to everybody else. So that's our fourth C is communication. Communicating at a very high level. Great leaders are like DJs. They're able to make sure that people are hearing the message in the way that resonates with them. They know which knobs to turn up, which knobs to turn down on their communication style. So that's our communication piece. Once you can communicate that vision often and in different ways, because it doesn't resonate with everyone the same way. Communication is a very simple thing, but a very complex thing at the same time. So I say it's simple, not easy. It's all about getting the other person to receive the message that you're trying to give. But there's so many variables that go into that. What is their motivation? Are they extrinsically, intrinsically motivated? What's the scenario? What's the context? What's the environment? What's your body language? What are their past experiences? I mean, there's so many things that go into it. Great leaders are absolute experts at communicating, and they're studying those things because they know how important it is to communicate to people not only what we're doing, but why it's good for them. Why is this important to you? Why does this matter? Lastly is your creativity. So once you have those four mastered, now you can start to be creative in the way that you lead. A lot of corporate cultures, a lot of new athletic coaches, when they come in, will say it's about getting the people on the bus and the wrong people off. Well, you're leaving out a really important step there. And that step is getting the people in the seats. So what good is it to have the people on the bus if the person that has Google Maps is sitting in the back, or the person that can drive the bus is sitting 3 seats behind the driver's seat? Well, that doesn't help us. So creativity and leadership comes down to identifying strengths and weaknesses within your team, identifying your bell curve, who falls where on the performance chart, and then how do I manipulate that chart so that more people get towards our high performer realm and less people are down dragging our team back? How do I make our bottom 20% better, our middle 60% even better, and then our top 20% or top 10%, how do we make them really drive this thing home? And the way that you do that is through relationships, but that's a creative endeavor in and of itself. And so creativity is key. It's in our society, it's synonymous with leadership. Like when we look at the pandemic and we talk about the companies that came out of the pandemic stronger, nobody says that so and so managed them through crisis. They say, no, they led them through crisis. When we talk about a Super Bowl winning quarterback, nobody says he managed his team to a Super Bowl. We say he led his team to a Super Bowl. And so leadership and creativity are so closely intertwined in our society that you can't have one without the other. And our job as leaders is to see around corners. Our job as leaders is to be creative, be able to pivot, and make sure that the ship continues in the direction. So those are our 5 C's. It's a lot, but if you really break them down, there's skills that go into each one, and we supply toolboxes for each of those of like, hey, here's how you build your character, here's how you build your consistency. And that's where the systems and processes comes in the frameworks.
I absolutely love that. Every one of the 5 C's that you mentioned are absolutely crucial, like you to develop yourself professionally. And who wouldn't want to be a better leader and just be a better person? I think my favorite trait within there is the communication piece. All are very important. But just like you said, it's not about trying to get something off our chest in this way. It's that you want the receiver to understand and hear the message that you're trying to communicate. What is the end goal? What are the motivations behind it? You need to make sure that you can get buy-in from the team, or at least make sure the message resonates with them. It can be a challenge, but the more that we work on all of those, the better person we can be, the better leader we can become.
Yeah, and it starts with doing your groundwork, like do your homework on people. When I look at doing that homework and learning to communicate with somebody, the first thing I look at is what do they want out of this relationship, out of this interaction? And we can say, oh, I don't want to be transactional. I'm not saying transactional. It can be transformational in nature, but they have a goal. And so what do they want? Is it safety and trust? Do they want to be understood? Do they want to be in control? Do they want status? What drives them? Then from there, I'm going to look at what are their motivations. Is it extrinsic? Is it intrinsic? Meaning, how do I motivate this person to be influenced into doing what we want them to do? Because every conversation is a selling conversation in one way or another. You're either trying to make a point, you're trying to persuade somebody to do something. Everything is selling. Then I'm going to look at our level of trust. How deep does this person trust me? And if they don't trust me deep enough for me to make a big ask, then how do I build that trust? And the best way to do that is to kind of identify, like, I like watching people around people that they really trust. So before I address a room, I like to watch how they interact with their friends or the people that they trust on the team. And then I can gauge that when I'm interacting with them. Like, okay, how far off is this from the way that they acted with their friend? Now, obviously, there's a power dynamic that's at play, but we want to try and get it as close as possible. So you have to look at that. How deep is the level of trust? And then there's tips and tricks that we teach to increase that level of trust very quickly. There's little hacks that you can kind of do that are basically parlor tricks, more or less, for a behavioral psychologist that you can play with. And then I want to look at their response patterns, like just being an observer. Think about how somebody has responded in the past to situations like this? Does this person typically respond well to being negotiated with? How do we negotiate with this person, especially in business? Like, what's this person's response patterns? Are they somebody that handles adversity? Do they handle stress? No. Well, okay, well, then I should probably take this person out to dinner. If they don't deal well in a one-on-one, then let's go break bread. And it could just be going across the street to the food truck. But I just need to know that. And that bleeds into that last piece of the homework, which is knowing the setting. The worst thing that leaders can do, and anybody in business, is repeatedly put yourself in cringy situations where you don't consider the external influences of the situation. So we can all relate to being in the back seat and a couple starts fighting and you're like, this is the most awkward thing I've ever been a part of. Like, I don't want to do this now. Yet we do it all the time in business where we have a conversation with somebody that would have been better off being a one-on-one conversation. So we have to be very aware of all those things. It's the goals, the motivation, your level of trust, their response patterns, and the setting that you're in.
Oh, so influential. And all of this plays a role into trying to get that end goal, the outcome that you're trying to achieve. And all these factors need to be taken into consideration if they're going to affect our behavior or affect how a message resonates with us. Because again, we're just trying to get this end goal, this outcome. You may have unintended consequences of, I brought this situation up in the wrong spot or the wrong time. Again, it's about making sure that the message resonates well with them. Place, time, I think that's really important to that. And when we're building better leaders, that has to affect culture, doesn't it? And how do we define our culture? How does that come into play within business and leadership?
Culture's a really interesting thing because it's this big buzzword now and it gets thrown around so much. And there's so much pseudoscience behind it of like pop culture. This is what culture is. Our workplace, we have the best workplace culture in the world. Our corporate culture is phenomenal. And I'm not sure that everybody really understands it because the places that have the best cultures are the ones that are simple and the ones that are applied in multiple ways. When you look at corporate culture or any type of culture for that matter, there's two main kinds of culture that you have within your business. You have your stated culture, which is the pretty phrases that HR and legal drew up for you that says this is who we are. And then you have the one that really matters, which is your experience culture. That's what's happening on a day-to-day basis. Now, the beautiful thing is this: companies and teams and organizations that do really well are the ones where those two types of culture are not very far off. There may be some fluff in it from HR or legal that made it pretty and look good on the employee handbook, but ultimately at its core, it's who we are. And it's really what we do on a daily basis. It's internalized and operationalized. Teams and businesses that have a really big problem are the ones who say we are one thing and then they experience something completely different. That's when people leave. That's when you have employee turnover. That's when you have low client retention. That's when you have all types of feedback issues, communication issues, inter team issues. All of that occurs when there's a split between who you say you are and who you actually are. So when you're defining your culture, the way that I tell people to start with this is to look at somebody on your team that if somebody knew nothing about your business and you wanted one person that they should meet for them to tell you, like, this is what it is. So if somebody came to me and said, who should I meet from Edge Leadership Academy? That person that comes to mind, that's your culture. And then you write down, who is this person? What makes them special? What values do they have? What habits do they have? What behaviors do they have? And then use that as a jumping off point. You don't have to use those exact values and behaviors, but use that as a jumping off point and say, okay, now I know this is what a representation of the culture that I want is. So now let me take that and rework it and make it so that it fits, so that it's, okay, this is who we are. This is how we act, because that's ultimately what culture is. It defines what's celebrated, what's tolerated, what's rewarded. How do we interact with in-group and out-group members? That's ultimately what culture is. And so what I'm going to define is all those things, but I'm going to write down examples of behavior so that I can reward that within my culture. And I'm going to make sure that there's a feeling of safety and trust within our group, that I can trust that everybody in the group is going to abide by this set of standards. And this is how our standard operating works. So that sets the basis for the culture. And then from there, you just have to constantly be reinforcing and re-engaging in it. It's not a one-day retreat to Six Flags with your team. It's not a barbecue at the boss's house, even though everybody thinks, well, it was informal. I brought them into my home. Now we're family. Doesn't work that way. Are you consistently doing the things that build the trust within the relationship? Are you consistently having feedback conversations? Are you consistently having positive conflict? That's another good question, because great cultures have great conflict. Why? Because they're able to look at an issue and say, listen, we're going to hash this out, but the only goal here is the best possible solution in the minimal amount of time with zero residual effects. That's what we're looking for. Boom. It's that simple.
If we could apply that to every area of our life, that's following the path of least resistance while hoping for the best outcome. I think that's fantastic.
Yeah, it's simple. It's not easy. Why? Because anytime you're dealing with people, emotions get involved. And so then positive conflict moves into quote unquote, and I hate this word, toxic conflict. That's where you have problems. And usually that happens because one or more parties is unable to emotionally regulate. So that's something that you got to work on. You have to build those skills. We have to be able to emotionally regulate and keep the main thing. One of the things that we see a lot is like if I'm a new manager, for example, you ever been around a salesman that doesn't know when to stop selling?
Yeah.
It's the same thing sometimes with feedback conversations where we start to have a feedback conversation and it's uncomfortable because we don't want to give somebody else critical feedback because we know that they're not going to like it. So what happens is we start verbal vomiting. And then all of a sudden we're bringing things up that are not the main point of this conversation at all. And we're just piling it on. Meanwhile, this person is feeling blindsided, upset, targeted, all these different things. And then we expect that to be a productive conversation. It's not going to be because you just ruined any chance of them being able to take in what you're trying to give them. So we have to set up our feedback channels and our feedback conversations much more intentionally. I talk to managers about this a lot. It should be the most intentional thing you do all day. If you have to give somebody critical feedback, it should be the most intentional thing that you do all day, meaning you should go into it with a plan. You should know how you're going to engage it. You should know how you're going to address it, meaning what data points are you going to point to? How are you going to keep the main thing the main thing? You need to have a parachute. So the parachute is what am I going to do if this person emotionally responds to this situation? How am I going to de-escalate it? Usually that should be with questions. It should be, okay, obviously this is an issue. It's touchy for you. What resources are you not getting from me? What support are you not getting from me that's resulting in this emotional outburst? What can I do to make this better? And we should always finish a feedback conversation with a plan of action, KPIs along the way, and then also who's going to be in charge of it? How are we going to measure this thing? How often are we going to check in? And then a goal or a repercussion if it doesn't get met. Like every feedback conversation follows a very easy structure if you're intentional about it. But most times they're not. It's just, I need you to be better. What does that mean?
Be
Based on what?
specific.
Yeah, be specific. It's like if I called a basketball player and said, hey, you suck at rebounding, click. That's not feedback, and I think that's what we mess up a lot. And especially as the generational gaps get a little bit different, like boomers feel a certain way, Gen Z feels a certain way, all across the board. Like everybody has, well, this is how we like feedback. And okay, at the base level, it's all the same. It follows the same structure. So great critical feedback, no matter what words come out of my mouth, what you should hear is, we have high standards here. I believe that you can reach those standards. I want you to be a part of the success that we're going to have here. In order for you to be a part of that, I need you to do X, Y, and Z. I need you to do it in the following timeline. What resources do you need from me? Like that's the formula. That's it. That's critical feedback there. That's an excellent feedback conversation. What you actually say might be completely different based on your environment and what you have, but that's the basic formula for it.
Yeah, absolutely. And anything in business, I feel like sometimes we're a little bit too reactionary and we just want to say what's on our heart and we don't take that time to plan or prepare the statement. How is the conversation going to go? All these different directions that it could take. Just a little bit of planning and preparation could absolutely change the outcome and the messaging that just help communicate to the team and build a better business. And it's lacking, unfortunately. I myself have had great leaders that have brought up those tough conversations in such professional ways that it really resonated well with me. And I was like, that's an example of a great leader. And I want to replicate that and make sure that I'm meeting the KPIs and the action that they want me to take, which is, it's important. And I'm sure that that ties in with the overall systems and processes that kind of create high performance. Because you mentioned the KPIs, delegating and the action items. What goes beyond those systems and the high performance processes?
Yeah, I think when you're looking at high performance, I always start with the individual because I think once you can systematize your life, you can systematize your business. If you look at somebody's car, how messy their car or their desk is, it tells you what's going on in their mind. Like, I think it's the same thing. So I believe in building systems in your life first. And so I look at things like your habit stacks. Like that's a system. You have to have a stack of habits that keep you on track. And most people don't. And you can apply this in the business sense. So I'll give you an example and then I'll show you how it applies in business. So I'll give you my own example. I wake up in the morning, first things first, I get water, then I meditate, then I read, then I journal. And then at some point during the morning, I work out. So now the workout gets moved around, which it shouldn't, admittedly, but it does. But those core four things never change. That's non negotiable for me. Those things have to happen. And so what that does is that sets the foundation for the rest of my day. I've now checked in with me to take care of me first. I have to be selfish so that I can be selfless throughout the rest of my day. So now I can be in service of my clients, my team, whoever needs me throughout the rest of the day. Be here with you, be present in this podcast. I can do all those things because I took that time to be selfish in the morning. So that's my stack. Now, here's the key to this. Outside of that stack, are little habits that you have in your life. And these are things that are generally pretty ingrained that you do automatically. So everybody has some things that they just do automatically. So for me, I love shoes. I'm a big shoe guy. My bedroom is filled with shoes and they're all color coded in individual slots in like shoe cases. And so I do that pretty much automatically. Like when I take shoes off, I put them back in the case. So I know that when I come home, if there's a pair of shoes laying somewhere, then something is off in my systems. So it's like a check engine light. So what do garages do when you bring your car in and you put on and the check engine light is on? They hook it up to a computer and they audit all your systems. And so that's what I do. When that check engine light comes on, I sit down and I say, okay, what else is out of balance in my life? Because somewhere else something's not. And generally I can figure out, oh, I missed my nutrition here, or I took on too many projects going on this quarter. I need to bump something the next quarter. Or I have this feedback conversation that's been sitting on my mind, haven't done anything about it, etc. So you see how it all it's like a solar system. It all is in one system. Nothing in our life happens in a vacuum. And so I think systematizing your life is the first step. So habits is one area. Another area is your social circle. Like most people do not audit or curate their social circle in any way, shape, or form. They are completely subject to whatever environment is they're around. That drives me nuts because ultimately you are in control of that. And so I tell people in our group and people that work with me, build levels to your social circles. Start with level 3, which are your business acquaintances, your fringe friends, maybe your friends from high school, like people that you like. Hey, I like having a beer with this guy. I like playing golf with him. We're not going to talk business, but I like it. What I do with those people is I limit their access and their influence on me. So what I mean by that is we can hang out, but it's got to be on my terms. And as soon as you start to breach that, we stop hanging out. That's it. Like you have to understand I'm going on a climb. Now I don't feel like you're built for the altitude. So you have to kind of stay down here for a while. Nothing personal. Love you, like, or not love you, but like you. You're a good guy. Good for you. But your access and influence has to be limited. Then as you move inward, you have this second group, which I call your team. Like these are people that you love. You like them and you love them. So a lot of times it's your family, it's closer friends. Again, they're not all the way in. They don't quite understand, but they're going to make half the climb with you. And they're still an important part of your life. So I'm not as strict on the amount of time or energy that I spend with them, but I do keep an eye on it. And I ask myself, how do I feel after I'm done hanging out with this person? Because just because you love someone doesn't mean they're good for you. And so I do ask myself that. How does this person make me feel? Are they bringing me a lot of positive energy? Are they bringing me a lot of negative energy? Also, what traits do they bring out in me? Do they bring out the best in me? Do they bring out the worst in me? Listen, I got friends from high school that I love to death. They bring out the worst in me. They bring out the wild card. They bring out the wild card. You know, I'm shooting whiskey and having a good old time with them. Not necessarily great for my entrepreneurial journey. And so I have to relegate them to level 1. They can't get into that team level. They have to just be in the connections level. So my people inside are my team, the group 2. Inside is group 3. These are the people that are in the arena on a daily basis. These are the people that I want to spend time with. These are the people that hold me accountable. These are the people in my life that I say have the green light, meaning they can question me on absolutely anything at any time in front of anybody. They have the absolute green light to hold me accountable to be the best version of myself. And those people I cherish. Those people I like, I love, and I trust. Those are the people that are going on this journey with me. So When I look at it again, I think to myself, level one, you probably aren't built for the climb. Level two, we're still figuring it out. I'm not sure yet. You might get altitude sickness as we get higher up this mountain. So I got to keep an eye on you. Level three, you're locked in with me on the harness. We're going to the top, and that's how I look at my life. And I do this every quarter. So every quarter I sit down and I audit all of that. And I pick 5 to 7 relationships at each level and I audit them. And I do the same thing with my habits and I do the same thing with my mindset and what I've been reading and what I've been doing. I do the same thing with my fitness goals. I do the same thing with my business goals. I do the same thing with my personal relationships. It's all one big system because the more systematized and the more measured everything is, the more I can manage it. And the more I can manage it, the more impact I can have in my business, the better I show up in my relationships, and the better friend and family member I am. So it's all encompassing. When I talk about leadership systems and high performance systems, that's what I talk about. I try and create an environment. And I learned this from being around NFL players and NFL coaches and guys like that. They create environments that make it really hard for them to fail. It's easy to be in shape. Like, this surprised to me that I was in the best shape of my life when I was at a Division I football university working with a football team. Like, it's no surprise. I was my most disciplined when I'm surrounded with a bunch of entrepreneurs. Like, there's no surprise there. So successful people like those NFL athletes and those coaches, they build an environment that makes it really hard for them to fail, because what it does is it puts friction between them and bad choices, and it removes friction between them and good choices. And so now you're selectively exposing yourself to the things that you want to become.
Yes, absolutely. That is so insightful. And I've even had some aha moments here because I don't think as entrepreneurs and business owners, sometimes we even realize how much our community influences us and our success or lack thereof. And I think sometimes we do this subconsciously. Suddenly, these friendships, we don't have time to message or text them back, or suddenly they fizzle out. And subconsciously, we kind of gave them that boot to the next level down, unfortunately. And it's kind of funny that you do this quarterly. And I think that's so valuable. And in my head, I'm just thinking now you have to draft acceptance and denial letters to your friends. Like, our records indicate our friendship has lasted 12 months. Unfortunately, you don't meet the requirements and you're sending them a rejection letter.
Yeah, it's fortunately for us in the age of texting, it makes things a lot easier, because a lot of times those relationships, like you said, they'll fizzle out. They'll send, because it's uncomfortable for them too. Like, we surround ourselves, we seek out environments, people, places, content, experiences that reaffirm the identity that we have or the identity that we're chasing. One of the two, the identity that we're becoming. And so as you grow, there you can feel the distance between you and that person. And sometimes people try to hold on to a relationship and they try and say, well, maybe they'll grow. Like, listen, I'll throw a rope down for you when I get up there, but I can't wait for you, because that would be selfish. Because my job is to impact as many people as I possibly can. My job is to help my clients, help my family. Like, it's bigger than me. Like, my vision is to leave a legacy for my family to be proud of. I can't do that if I stop every time somebody gets altitude sickness on the way up the mountain. Like,
Yes.
that's not fair. I have a responsibility to the next generation of kitchens, the next generation of my family, to be the one that changes everything for our bloodline. That's my vision. That's my job. And so it would be selfish for me to wait here and hope that you grow every time somebody in my life can't quite make it. Because if everybody was built for the climb, there wouldn't be there wouldn't be entrepreneurs. You wouldn't be rare air to get to that place, because everybody would be able to get there.
Yes, absolutely. Man. And it really helped me out to start connecting with more like-minded business owners who are in similar situations or years and months ahead of me already, so that I could look up to them. I could follow them by example. So that way I can start pushing down the people that are kind of holding me back, and then start introducing more people into my circle that remove the friction from making the good decisions, and then introduce more friction into those bad decisions. We can't have things holding us down.
Yeah, and it's pretty cool, because for me, when I notice that somebody is maybe not holding up their end of the deal, and maybe it's time for them to kind of move out, or me to limit their access and influence to me, I will be really intentional about sharing resources with that person. Not in a condescending way, but I'll be really intentional about, hey man, I read this and I thought about you, and I want to see, do they grab the rope? Like, that's me throwing the rope down and saying, hey, come with me. I want you here. but I need you to show me that you want to be here. And so I'm really intentional about that stuff. And if I don't get the response, then I did what I could. I tried. And so then I can move on. Because sometimes what happens is you throw that lifeline down, you're now showing that person, hey, I believe in you. And sometimes there's a lot of people on this world that are one hype man away from taking their first step. And they just need someone to be like, I believe in you.
Yes, 1,000%. They
You
just
know,
need that little bit of push, that encouragement.
yeah, yeah. It's just, hey, I'm going on this journey. I think you're made for this too. Let's go. Let's go together. And if they turn that help down, then hey, you sit with that for a while. I gave you the resources, I gave you the map. I'll gladly check back in with you, but I can't sit here until you figure it out. I can't sit here until you cut teeth and can eat grown man food. Like,
Exactly.
we got to go hunt.
Train's leaving, it's time to go.
Yeah, yeah, we got to go, man. I'm on a journey here.
And I'm sure, while we're trying to help other people out, they may not be in the exact mindset just yet. Maybe they have things that are holding them down, or I don't know, they're just not ready yet. But within the mindset, you mentioned we have to overcome our adversity. Resiliency plays a role, and abundance versus scarcity. How does our mindset play a role in this? And how can we help improve that mindset to help get us further?
It's the key that unlocks all of the goals. It's the key that unlocks all the vaults that you want. And it's also the hardest battle that you'll ever have to do because it's the one that happens between your ears. And it's the one that happens at night when the lights are out and it's just you. When all the busyness of being an entrepreneur and the business and all the things that you're doing, when all that stops for a second and it's quiet, like that's the fight you have to win. That's the moment you have to win. And that's really difficult. And so what I've found throughout my career is that the more work I do on myself, the more intentional I am about building my mindset and exploring my emotions and exploring why I react the way I do, why I respond the way I do, why I handle certain situations, and working through that with help. The more I do that, the more my business improves and the more my relationships improve and everything gets better. And that is scary for a lot of people because it requires looking in the mirror and it requires really sitting down and going to the deep, dark places in the boxes that we put underground a long time ago and said that we were never going to open again. Well, you have to know what drives you. And it's so interesting because there's people that are fueled by this. Like they say, oh, watch me prove them wrong. Everybody said I couldn't do this. Well, here's my thing. That's like gasoline. You throw it on a fire, it burns hot for a second. It doesn't burn for a long time. You have to find a sustainable fuel that's going to get you all the way to the top of the mountain because it is a long journey. And so you
Yes.
have to do that. And so part of that is building the correct mindset around adversity, building the correct mindset around abundance versus scarcity. So when I say abundance versus scarcity, I speak about this a lot from personal experience because I grew up in a single parent household. We were poor. My mom worked 3 jobs. We ate whatever was left over at the restaurant that night. Like that's who we were. We always had free lunch at school, like the reduced or free lunches. That was us. So I had a terrible relationship with money. So when I started in entrepreneurship and I started to make a little bit of money, I was so scared to spend it. And I was so scared because I didn't know if it was going to happen again. I was like, no, it's all going to come crashing down. I'm living life in this house of cards. Like I had this fear and I had to really examine that. Like I had to sit down and be like, wait, why? All the data in my life has pointed otherwise, has told me that I would be successful. And so why am I so afraid of this? And so going from that scarcity to the abundance mindset is understanding that there's opportunities everywhere. You just have to train your mind to look for them. It's like the red car theory. If somebody mentions a red car or if your friend gets a red car, all of a sudden you see red cars everywhere. There's no more red cars now than there was yesterday. You're just looking for them.
Yes.
And so we get stuck in this and it works both ways. We get stuck in these feedback loops, which can be positive or negative. And so if you're a negative person, if I spill coffee on my shirt in the morning, I'm late going out the door. What does everybody say when they get in the car? Ah, it's just one of those days. Well, now you just set your brain up for the rest of the day that you're going to be looking for negative opportunities. You're going to be looking or negative events, negative situations. And there's also this thing called the Pygmalion effect, meaning if you expect somebody to be something, you're going to give them opportunities to be that way. So if I'm going into a business meeting and I just said in my car, it's one of those days, and then I walk in and my mindset when I see the person that I'm going to negotiate with is I've now made them an enemy and I've villainized them, I'm going to give them opportunities to act like a jerk. And then I'm just going to confirm what I already thought about them. So it doesn't help anybody. On the flip side, if I prime my mind that there's opportunities everywhere and that everything is an opportunity and that no is exciting and that adversity is exciting and that losing a deal means I'm closer to making a bigger deal, then all of a sudden I start to see opportunities everywhere. But you have to be intentional about it. You have to be
Yes.
intentional. But once you do, then you can start to be there. And the mind is so interesting, man. And I love the psychology piece behind it.
Isn't it
There's so
crazy?
many,
It can be like your best advocate and your worst enemy, and
absolutely.
it's a constant fight.
So you have this, everyone has this voice inside their head. Everyone has it. If you say you don't talk to yourself, unless I think there's like 15% of the population that actually doesn't have an inner dialogue, but everybody else does. And so what you have to learn is that that voice in your head is what I call it your crazy roommate. Like it's going to talk no matter what. It's going to grab the microphone. As soon as something happens, it's going to grab the microphone first. Really successful people have learned to either quiet that voice or become friends with that voice. Really unsuccessful people have learned to listen to every impulsive thing that that voice says. So your job is to get to a point, and I use this exercise a lot with like managers and CEOs and athletes. When the chips are down and it's, the end of Q2 and you're behind on your sales goal, or it's the bottom of the ninth inning and you're up to bat and you're down one, I want you to think, what if my thoughts were on the scoreboard? Or what if my thoughts were presented on the monitor in front of everybody in the office? All the internal thoughts that I'm having now, what if they were up there? Right? And then you can start to curate that stuff and you can start to say, no, this is what I would want up there. These are the thoughts that I need to be having. And so you have to get really intentional about noticing what the thoughts that you're having are. And I'm not saying like delusional optimism, because I think that's nonsense too, but being able to accept things for what they are, neither good nor bad. They just are. They're neither good nor bad. They're just events. What you do next, what comes next, your ability to live in that gap and ride out that emotional dump that's happening, that hormone dump that's going on, that's where the change happens. Like your ability to say, okay, this quote unquote bad thing happened. I'm going to ride this dump out, this emotional dump, because emotions are information. They're not instructions. And we get that wrong all the time. We think they're instructions. Sad does not mean eat Ben and Jerry's. Angry does not mean punch you in the face. Like they don't translate, but we translate them into behaviors. So instead, what I'm going to do is say, okay, this emotion's happening. I feel it. It's getting my attention. It means that there's something here that I need to be aware of. And then I'm going to respond the way I choose to respond because I'm in control of that. And that's what I'm talking about when I say moving the mindset. I think that's so important for an entrepreneur because listen, there's no guarantees in this thing. I mean, there's days where 8 a.m. you're on top of the world, noon you're at the bottom of the barrel, 4 o'clock in the afternoon you're back on top of the world. Like that's how that's how it goes.
Yes, absolutely. It is an incredible roller coaster that there's a lot of wins and successes. There's a lot of challenges, and it's something that we face every day. But if we could try to change that outcome towards a more positive side, that mindset piece is going to be so valuable. There was a small post or quote that someone had shared with me about the mindset, and that one is your attitude shapes your perception, and your perception shapes your reality. So when we consider that, it's how does that outlook, what is your mindset is going to shape the way that you perceive the world and things that happen to you. And then that perception now becomes your reality. It shapes your reality and how you view the world. And just so important to have our mindset in order to be a better person, be a better leader, be a better entrepreneur. It's what we're trying to do. We're just trying to better ourselves, the self-improvement.
Yeah. I say it to my team all the time. We can't lose. There's no such thing. We can't lose, guys. When my guys are nervous about something or we're getting ready for a product launch, and like, guys, we can't lose. We've done the work. We've outlined our minimally viable product. We've outlined what a perfect launch is. The rest is just whatever. All we can do is the worst possible scenarios we learn. It's the worst possible scenario. Because if you stay in, this is the beautiful thing about entrepreneurship. It's a war of attrition. If you just stay in the game longer than other people and you continue to pick up these little lessons and these nuggets along the way, you're going to win. Like there's so many ways to make money out there and there's so many opportunities to build businesses. This fires me up. I get excited talking about this because it's literally just, I'm going to stay in this longer than everybody else. So when I see people falling off and you ran into this road bump and you ran into this road bump, whatever, you just got to be better at staying in the fight. And maybe that's a pivot. Maybe it's like I said earlier, running an apparel line for a couple months so I can make some money to keep my main business running. But that's just attrition because in my mind, I know I'm not going to be in the apparel business forever. This is a means to an end. This is just so I can stay in the fight. This is me, like when you're at the poker table and you got to ante up. Like this is just me paying to play. And so if I can continue to pay to play and stay in the game long enough, eventually I'm going to win because I'm getting myself in the rooms. I'm asking the questions. I'm picking up the lessons. That's how people win. That it's over time. And so I think that's the cool thing about entrepreneurship is just 99% of it is just staying in the fight.
It really is. It's really just overcoming those obstacles and just sticking with it. Like you said, sometimes there's a pivot. Sometimes you're going to do things that you never thought you would do. However, at the end of the day, if you are committed to it and you stick with it, you're going to go somewhere. It's going to be good for you. And obviously, from our conversation today, David knows what he's talking about. He shared the tips and tricks, how to become a better leader, everything that is going to help you become a better entrepreneur. Now, David, where can people find more about you and Edge Leadership Academy?
Yeah, so we're online, edgeleadershipacademy.com. There's all our booking forms and everything are on there. There's some products as well. I'm on all social medias at Coach D Kitch. I keep it super simple. So every social media platform you could think of, just whatever that social media is / at Coach D Kitch. That's always me. I'm most active on like Instagram. My team runs TikTok for me, so that we're pretty active on there as well. We have our mentorship group opening up again. So we do a small mentorship group called The Table because everybody wants a seat at it. Everybody wants to bring something to it. We run that 3 times a year. That's going to be opening up again this winter. So keep an eye out for that. If you're interested, please reach out to me. Let me know. We do an application process. It's a pretty exclusive thing. We only take 15 people at a time. And like I said, we only do 45 total per year. So we do three groups of 15. It's one-on-one mentorship and group mentorship with me for 12 weeks. It's phenomenal. I love doing it. And then we also have our online community launching soon. So that'll be the tribe. That'll also be on our website. And so, yeah, any of those links. Then obviously, if you're looking for one-on-one coaching, we do have a couple slots available and some workshops and stuff are coming up as well. So if you're interested in that stuff, just find us on the internet, find us on a social media and let me know. We can get you pointed in the direction.
Fantastic. David, thank you so much for your information and the insight to everything that you're doing. Congratulations on all of your success. Keep up the hard work. You are killing it out there. I love to see it. For those of you who are listening, we'll have links available down in the description. And make sure you go visit him and check everything that David has to offer because obviously he knows what he's doing. Thank you, everyone, for joining me. I hope you have a good rest of your day.